December 9th, 1980. Thousands gather in stunned silence outside the exclusive Dakota Apartments in New York City. The music world mourns a legend. John Lennon is dead. The night before, the former Beatle had been gunned down as he returned to his apartment at the Dakota. Mark David Chapman, a 25-year-old drifter, was arrested at the scene and charged with second-degree murder. Chapman would later say that he was a longtime fan of John Lennon. The next afternoon, the front page of the New York Daily News carried this haunting image of John Lennon signing an autograph. The adoring recipient was his killer, Mark David Chapman. The now famous picture was taken by Paul Goresh, a 20-year-old amateur photographer from Newark, New Jersey. Like Chapman, Goresh was obsessed with John Lennon. In essence, Paul Goresh and Mark David Chapman are two sides of the same coin. But while Chapman's fixation on John Lennon took a tragic, demented turn, Paul Goresh's pursuit of the ex-Beatle evolved into a unique, friendly relationship. The story behind this story begins 11 years ago. Paul Goresh was a lifelong Beatles fan with an elaborate scheme to penetrate security at the Dakota Apartments and meet his boyhood idol. It was February 12th, 1979. Paul Goresh was a part-time driver for an electronics shop. At noon, he and a friend arrived at the Dakota, posing as TV repairman. Paul carried a copy of John Lennon's first book and a bogus service order to get him in the door.
J&J Electronics, we're here to see J. Lennon.
Is he expecting you?
It's right here on my
We went up
sheet.
to the doorman. You know, I showed him the service order. I was acting like because I had wrote J. Lennon, not John Lennon. I wanted to act like I was totally oblivious to who we were going in the apartment of. You know, he didn't even blink at it. It was perfect to him.
It was Paul Goresh's lucky day. By coincidence, John Lennon was having problems with his VCR. Lennon's secretary assumed that Lennon had made the service call himself.
Stop acting so nervous.
Incredibly, the two imposters were allowed to proceed upstairs.
I hear him. It's him. He's in the apartment.
So I said to Mario, I said, he's in there. I can hear him. I said, we're going to knock on the door. I said, she's going to open the door, and John Lennon's going to be sitting at that table. The adrenaline's really flowing now for me, and I'm really excited. And I'm expecting the secretary. And my chin must have just dropped.
J&J Electronic Services here.
Because I was in awe of him. I'm just staring at him. I'm amazed that he opened the door.
All right, come on in.
It was really funny because I honestly think he detected that something was funny. And it must have been from my reaction, maybe, because I was so excited when I saw him. Maybe he had seen that look before, you know, of a fan.
Who sent for you anyway?
Paul's scheme to get an autograph soon backfired. The Lennon household had recently been the target of crank calls and threats. Lennon believed his secretary had called the repairman and became angry because he'd not been consulted beforehand.
Come here.
The secretary suggested that Paul return in a few days when Lennon had calmed down.
Have you guys come back another time?
Sure.
So I was like a little upset. I was proud that I got to at least see him and deal with him, but I was like a little disgusted at the way it turned out, and especially that I didn't get my autograph.
4 days later, Paul scheduled another appointment with Lennon's secretary. She had no idea that Lennon no longer had a problem with his VCR. He simply purchased a new one. Unaware, Paul and another friend arrived at the Dakota. They found Lennon in his first-floor office. This time, Paul Goresh brought a camera.
He was real friendly and cordial, and he said, I want to apologize to you guys for my behavior the last time. He said, but I wasn't mad at you guys. He said, I was mad at my secretary. And I almost wanted to tell him at that point, well, you know, it wasn't her fault either, because I'm just a fan, but I still wanted to get my book signed.
Come on.
Actually, last time I was here, I brought a copy of your book with me, and I have it with me now. I was wondering if maybe you'd autograph it.
He says, I don't give autographs hardly anymore. He says, but I figure I owe you that much.
I really don't want to.
And then he spots an Instamatic camera that I had.
Photographs.
Oh, just one?
No, I'm sorry, no photographs. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make a deal with you. I'll autograph your book if you don't take any photographs, all right? Have you got a pen? Okay. Here's your book. Here's your pen. Here's your camera. And here's your box. Arrivederci Roma.
And I felt bad because, like, I knew that was probably, I thought, was going to be the last time I saw him. But I knew I couldn't be a jerk, you know. I mean, he was real nice to me, and I had gotten what I really wanted to get.
John. Hi, remember me?
Yeah, you were the fellow come to repair the VCR.
Right.
However, the autograph merely served to whet Paul's appetite, and he soon returned to the Dakota.
It'll just take a minute.
No, look, I let you in my apartment. I signed your book. I don't want you to take my photo. Leave me alone.
So I figured, well, if he's not going to stop and let me get a picture, I could probably get a telephoto lens, stand across the street from him, follow him, take a few pictures of him. He'll never be any the wiser, and he doesn't get upset. I have my pictures, and everybody will be happy.
What are you doing? I said no pictures, and you're taking pictures again.
It's just one picture. What is one picture going to do?
Look, just give me the film.
I'm not going to give you the film. It's just one picture.
Give me the film. Hey, give me the film. You're taking my...
I said, what are you so worked up for? He said, you said to me you were a fan. He said, if you're a fan, give me the film. I said, I am a fan. I said, and I only want the pictures because I am a fan. He says, well, if you're a fan, then leave me alone.
Fine. Process it. And if you like them, then send me a copy, okay?
Right. I said no pictures.
And I was just disgusted at, you know, now he's mad again. And then I guess I waited probably a month or two, and I went back.
John, what do you want this time?
I don't have my camera. I don't have my camera.
And I said, John, I just want to talk to you for a
Look, you
minute.
come up to me on
You know,
the
I'd
street
never
to
meant
take
to
my
cause you any
photograph.
grief.
There are people
I
trying
said,
to
I
come up
really,
to me
really
on the
feel
places I
bad
wanted.
that you had gotten angry. I said, and if you tell me to leave you alone, I said, right now, I said, I will never come back here again.
I will never come back.
And I remember him looking right in my eyes, and he said, stop looking at me as a beetle. You got to treat me just like you would treat anyone else. And he said, come on. And we walked, and we went for a walk.
Do you still work for that television repair company?
Paul Goresh began to live out the fantasy of every Beatles fan. From time to time during the months that followed, Lennon would let Paul tag along when he ran errands and took walks in the neighborhood.
You know, we had gone for walks on several occasions, and sometimes they wouldn't be long at all. I mean, I don't want to be misleading. Sometimes they'd be 5-10 minutes, but they were an eternity for a fan. And I remember we were walking one day, and I said to him, if it's not going to hurt our relationship, however little it is, if I could get a picture, you know. And he laughed, and he said, yeah. He says, when we're ready to go public, he said, I'll have my guy call you, and you can take all the pictures you want then. He says, because I think I'm getting ready.
6 months later, John Lennon hired a professional photographer to promote his return to the music world after a 5-year hiatus. Remarkably, Lennon kept his promise to Paul Goresh. He invited Paul to bring his camera and attend the session.
Paul, get your shot?
Yeah.
And John turns, and he spots me, and he says, Paul, you made it. And he says, you know, I'm glad. Well, now you can take your picture. And it was funny because, like in the sequence of photos that I took, he's looking at me instead of the guy that they were actually paying.
Paul was astonished when this picture was chosen to grace the jacket cover of Lennon's hit single, Watching the Wheels.
When that record came out, I was so proud of it because there's only 5 names on the record. You know, there's John's name, Yoko's name, the producer of the record, the owner of the record company, and my name.
From that moment on, Paul Goresh was John Lennon's official, unofficial photographer. He became a fixture at the Dakota documenting Lennon's comings and goings with dozens of informal snapshots. December 8th, 1980 was a day like any other, until Paul Goresh met another John Lennon fan named Mark David Chapman.
You waiting for Lennon?
Yeah.
So he said, I'm waiting to get my album signed. So I said, yeah, fine. So he says to me, where are you from? So I said, I'm from New Jersey. He says, no. I said, where are you from? He says, I'm from Hawaii. I said, where are you staying?
Why do you want to know?
And with that, he like snapped back, why do you want to know? And I was taken aback because he's the one that came over and initiated the conversation. I didn't even want to talk to this guy because I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to keep John pretty much to myself. And I said to him, look, leave me alone then. I didn't ask you to come over here and talk to me.
3 hours later, John and Yoko left the Dakota for a studio session. Paul Goresh and Mark Chapman were both waiting.
Listen, do you have those photos that you were going to show me from... All right. All right. Very studly.
Chapman walks up to John and holds the album out.
But do you want me to sign it?
And John looks at me like, you know, there's something strange. And as he's signing the album, I took a picture of him and Chapman. And after he signs the album, he then turns the album back to Chapman and raises his eyebrows and says, is that all right? And I took another picture with his eyebrows raised. And Chapman says, yeah, and steps back, like just back away. And John turned to me and looked at me like, you know, it's quite strange. As he was getting into the limousine, I took another picture of him. And John got into the limousine, and he was sitting looking at me. And as the limousine was pulling away, he waved to me. And I waved back, and that was the last time I ever saw him.
The last picture Paul took that night turned out to be the last photograph ever taken of John Lennon. For most of the world, this picture of John Lennon and Mark Chapman is the only important picture Paul Goresh ever took. Ironically, it may be the one photograph Paul Goresh would like to forget. For him, the dream was over.
It seems like a dream now. It definitely seems like a dream now, especially 10 years later. That's why I thank God for the pictures. And I'm very thankful for all the memories. He owed me nothing, but here's a man that's so special, and he's bothering to care a little bit about me, and I'll always remember that, and it'll always be special to me because he was so decent.